Okay, good morning, all of you, and welcome to TIFR Alumni Function. I'm Prabhu, Secretary of TA, currently in the Department of Condensed Physics and Material Science at the Kollam TIFR campus. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome all the dignitaries, delegates, friends, and our former colleagues and well-wishers of TIFR for this grand occasion. Welcome all the alumni members. Please feel at home because this is your function. I wish to take this opportunity to thank all those who helped this happen. Also, there is an exhibition by Anna. We strongly encourage all of you to visit this and help this organization, which is just near Afghan Church, which many of you must have seen for many years. It has been going on. And now, on the other team, I thank the various contributions from Agricultural Corporation France, which is Advanced Photonics, Mumbai, Laser Science, Coriolis, RIP GmbH Germany, and General Help of TIFR Tunela. And I welcome Professor Vahia, President of TIFR Alumni Association, to initiate this meeting. Professor Vahia, please. Good morning, it's a pleasure to be here. And what I'm going to do is to talk about a bit of sort of look back at who we are and what we are as soon as I can get important. So, TIFR is a statement of purpose, which not many of us know. The TIFR official statement of purpose is that TIFR should be dedicated to the pursuit of excellence in fundamental science and mathematics. We should pursue research which should bring prestige to India and occasionally even material benefits to India. We should nurture young scientists and we should have responsibility in science education. So that is what this institute is supposed to be. Today, TIFR, of course, has spent 75 years. We have done some large experiments, some small experiments. Some will be discussed here, some will not be discussed here. And over the next 2 days, we will discuss at least the major programs that have happened in TIFR last 2 years. But there are many, many small ones which we have not been able to accommodate in this program. So I think at the beginning of this session, we should try and remember some of those activities which will not be presented here. These are not going to be acknowledged. It's a pity because they're in their own very creative activities. So let me mention those who we will not have time to discuss. I'm not going to work that is going to mention in this details or some of the things that you will find here. I will not mention simply because there are full talks about it as time comes. So some of the lesser known activities of TIFR in computer science and computer communication, I think TIFR has done a lot of things which have sort of been forgotten with time. TIFRAC, for example, the first valve-based and eventually solid-state detector computer was designed in India in 1955. And I just want to warn you that these dates that I'm giving are something partly from my memory and partly from literature. So they may be off by a year or two here and there. Then BitNet, the first internet connectivity from India to the world, started in the 80s. We had an extensive program of monsoon predictions based on the CDC 316 that we had at that time. And eventually, of course, it went to the other institutions, but we did an extensive work on monsoon prediction using data from real-time ships and real-time data from ships and so on. Then we did our first Apple satellite experiment, and that disk is still there. The structure on which the disk stood is still there in the colony or in the refuge area, where we first tried to connect PRL to TIFR using Apple satellite to study how satellite communication will eventually work. And this was good 40 years ago. Early experiment in managing computer software and hardware, we got that 10 as our first computer from UN, and then a lot of work was done on trying to understand hardware-software relations and so on. Adjust and Aaron are two major projects we took for defense, and there were a large number of people who worked on that from 1981 to 90. Eventually, the technology was handed over to defense, and the group was dismantled. Data center for CERN is still active. We replicate CERN data here for other users to use. In 1970 to 75, Ayawat and Mahadevan came to TIFR with RN and worked extensively on digitalization of script, and that remains a standard about how to create purpose for unknown scripts and so on. That remains worldwide standard. It was copied several times later on. archaeology work of Devendra Lal and others on carbon-14 dating and monsoon, rainwater carbon-14, etc. were another set of classic experiments. We also had some experiments to try and detect tachyons. Did not get anywhere, but at least we had tried fairly hard to do that in 70s. We manufactured integrated circuits to learn how the technology works. Eventually, that technology was also handed over to somebody else. Then there is this experiment to study equivalence principle, extremely sensitive experiment to see if fifth force exists or there are variants in the equivalence principle of gravitation and inertial mass and so on. And there are some that I'm sure I have forgotten. There are some interesting indigenous initiatives like hydrogeology and water management of Professor Rama, where he tried to handle the Gangetic Plain flooding by creating reservoirs and so on. Teaching of music and computers again was an interesting experiment. It went on with Paritosh Pandya till 2020 and so on. Rock magnetism work was done in 1970s, which also remains one of the great works of TIFR. Then there were studies of reference frames and relativity and whether relativity, the idea of everything is relative or not, is true or not. There were some alternative attempts to understand quantum interpretation. There were some experiments on ultra cold atoms. There was some work in ancient astronomy, archaeoastronomy, and there are many others, some of which I probably never heard of or have slipped my mind for the moment, and I apologize for the same. These led to two parts. Some of them were just full hide, some of them were just doomed to fail, some of them were overtaken by events, and all kinds of things happened. But the idea was that all of them were bold, original, and path-breaking, and that remains the hallmark of TIFR. We are not really worried about whether we will succeed or not. We are more worried about doing something that is nice, something that is creative, and that challenges the prevailing wisdom. Pursuers of these ideas were not afraid to try something new and were quite willing to fail, and some succeeded, some failed. But the idea that you should remain creative is something that has become ingrained in TIFR. TIFR's outreach program, for example, also remains a good standard of its own. The original vision was that TIFR would simply seed research in India. But over a period of time, while we have helped many institutions like Samir and CST, etc., to come up and take up independent charge, even solid state corporation and so on, we also seeded many international collaborations. And there are many stories in TIFR folklore about how Baba would not accept any collaboration where India did not have equal share of responsibility and credit, and that we were not going to make ourselves simply available to some foreign collaborations. Many experiments of large-scale communication and all that, which have now become mainstream, were originally the first experiments done at TIFR. Several directors of institutions have come out of TIFR. Many advisory committee members have come to TIFR. Leaders in many fields have come from TIFR, and many entrepreneurs have found their roots in the work at TIFR. TIFR, therefore, has been like a large banyan tree from which it is often not even easy to make out the original roots, but those branches are everywhere. TIFR, this is not an accident, this is not a chance. It is a very well-designed plan. We have a remarkably novel model of administration which has allowed flexibility which is not possible in almost any other institution. We have had an extremely capable engineering services and other facilities which have allowed us to create things that other institutions would have struggled to create. Under this lies a very peculiar self-confidence of TIFR and a very intense work culture where there is no such thing as seniors not going and dirtying their hands in the lab. The faith was in gathering the best of minds and giving them freedom to do whatever they wanted to do. Something that many institutions have always feared to do. Even those institutions that allow you to pursue research generally load you up with teaching responsibilities, which negates many of the advantages of TIFR. TIFR has always been creative. I have always been creative, and destructive activities have been really very few. We have essentially been very creative. And despite the success of other institution has been able to replicate this kind of width of activity. And the motto of TIFR has always been something that you can't see. Has been that you never know until you have tried. And TIFR loves trying. So we at TIFR today have people from a variety of backgrounds, and we don't appreciate how much that variety of background of people have contributed to the culture of science, because each background has its own way of understanding the fundamental principles of interpreting those principles and their own perspective of how universe works. That cosmopolitan nature of TFR and its staff has worked remarkably well in favor of TFR, because every person with its own background, eventually science is individual dependence. And when you have individuals with variety of backgrounds, that certainly produces new ideas of creativity. Even at senior levels, the freedom to pursue knowledge is something that that only TFR provides. Some laurels have come, some have not, but we never cried for, and we have never fought for, and we have never complained about some laurels not coming to us. And TFR has always been confident. In fact, we have often been called arrogant, but never in doubt of itself in its place in the world. It's a remarkable institution. Behind the success lies the willingness to try something new and willingness to fail. TFR has never criticized failures. And even people who tried projects which did not succeed, they still got credit for having tried something new. Yet TFR has so many scientists of very high level that it is not possible to give acknowledgement to everybody for what they have done. In other words, for similar kind of work in another institution, you would have got much greater recognition than you get in TFR because of the way TFR is. And I don't know how many of you know, but when you join TFR, you have to go and report to one Mrs. Shore. And on the opposite side of the table where you sat, he had this saying. He made it clear that in heaven, an angel is no one in particular. Right on day one that you are joining, you were told that, look, you may be university top ranker and you may have come with great laurels, but here you are just one of the many who have achieved, who are here. And you should always remember that. And those humbling statements still resonate in my mind, that in heaven, an angel is no one in particular. And here, you are in a group which is unbelievably excellent. The personality of TFR has also been affected. So we are very self-infected and introverted as an institution. We have never taken cognizance of the recognitions, and we have never found distress in not getting them. We've got our recognitions, we've been happy with them, and we just carried on all along. Like all introverts, we are never convinced that we deserve the recognition we get, and always sure that we are worthy of the recognitions we did not get. And that's a very peculiar characteristic of TFR. The lack of land bands has also unfortunately restricted our national role. While we, as a group, TFR can contribute much more to national policy making, we have never pushed our people or ourselves into national bodies to the loss of the government, but it also been to some extent a loss to ourselves also. Many people who come to TFR from outside suddenly say, oh, we never even knew an institution of this depth and quality existed in India. Others have tried to take our place, others have tried to suppress us, others have tried to underplay our achievements, but TFR has never bothered. And TFR is never worried about somebody else outshining us or trying to outdo us. It has all been a part of our natural side. And that is because TFR has remarkable self-confidence. And that majesty of TFR becomes self-evident. Others may claim, but once somebody looks at it in detail, they will know what TFR is. Originally, TFR was supposed to be a seed institution for others in India. But over a period of time, we have found that the manner of working of TFR is not easy to replicate. And even though it has been remarkably successful, many have been unnerved by its model. And we have had some truly extraordinary members of TFR who needed their own space to work and their own space to expand. The result is that TFR has eventually ended up creating its own center. So HBCSE, NCRA, and each of them have their own great minds behind them. Obviously, they will now play a significant role in the coming days. In the first 50 years, we had very little biofield stations. Now they dominate the culture of TFR. And they will play a significant role in future, even though we are not going to discuss them today. That requires a separate meeting, and at some stage we should have a meeting about the future of TFR. The changing nature of science. Science itself has changed. What it was 75 years ago and what it is today is very different. Research is changing its nature. Research now requires more and more understanding of more realistic, complex systems. Isolated system studies were the hallmark 75 years ago. where you neglected secondary effects. Now that is no longer true. More and more complex systems need to be studied. The basic principles of nature have been substantially clarified over this time period and beyond, but the quantum field remains a challenge to our understanding. But millimeter-sized systems, as individual isolated systems, we reasonably understand. We need to understand the complexities when multiple parameters come into play and how complex systems work out. Quantum world, of course, has its own challenges which need to be looked at. Some even some adequacy of understanding of nature have also been continuously questioned, and there are many unsatisfactory explanations which need to be looked at. The bottom line is that the challenges have only increased since TIFR was born 75 years ago. So has TIFR's strength and breadth of activity increased. But TIFR will have to continue to reinvent itself, refocus itself, and continue to look for ways to answer the questions that nature keeps posing. What is the role of alumni association in that? Alumni association of TIFR can work with TIFR in several ways. There are always limitations to what you can do officially, and informal organizations can definitely help in many ways. And there are many places where we think the alumni association can help. We can encourage talent across the board, not just among students, but even among faculty and so on. We can reward excellence, whether it is just in PhD or whether it is some extraordinary work. We can help students get international exposure. One of the hallmark of early TIFR successes was its international exposure. And we need to continue to give international exposure to our students, not just through conferences, but even through visits. We should allow TIFR members to explore research ideas beyond the realm of activity. So if somebody thinks of something extraordinary for a quick look, the current mechanism is very difficult to maneuver through to get funding. So in principle, if alumni association has funding, we can look for small projects. Similarly, support international collaborations and other activities as the time passes. The bottom line is, for all this, we need resources, and that is going to be the primary objective of the association, at least in the near future. In longer future, hopefully, we will be able to do these things. All that TIFR believes is that the best is yet to come, and may this always be true for our institution. Thank you very much. So that is the driving force behind this meeting. We want to see how we have reached where we have reached, and then at a later date figure out how to go further and to see where we want to reach. So with those few words, thank you very much, Prabhuji.